All right. Hello. My name is Catherine Walker, and this
I
is,
am Cass. Oh, I'm Cassidy Bailey.
and we are doing our human performance technology module review questionnaire thingy about it. I'm going to go first. So, first things first, what is human performance technology? I think human performance technology is a systematic approach to improving production, efficiency, effectiveness within a organization. So what's the difference between HPT and HPI? So human performance technology and human performance improvement. So there's actually a few differences between them. Um, One of the best ways I like to just kind of think of it is um, HPI is improvement in the act of improving or changing something for the better. And HPT, so the technology piece, is the usage and knowledge of the tools, the technology, and the crafts. Why is it systematic? So I believe that it is systematic. It has a systematic approach because it helps you to identify like the desire or the situation that you are wanting to kind of go towards. So it helps you to like kind of do a diagnostic on the activities, like clarifying the problems, and really present yourself with an opportunity to have more of a assessment of a performance, help you develop intervention options, completing feasible studies. And it's also dependent on like a performance gap. So there's other ways that you can do analysis on them. And I think it really helps you to kind of understand what's the process that things have to go through in order for it to be a successful process, but also to understand like, okay, where were we and how is it going to be better afterwards? Does that make sense? I think that made sense. Okay, great. Made sense in my head. So what is a performance gap? So a performance gap is basically the gap between the current situation that's going on within the workplace, organization, or classroom, and where you want to be within like what your future goal is. So it's that gap in between. And so the basic purpose of it is for you to create some type of process in between that so that you can reach those accomplishments. And in the end, you're going to do some type of analysis of what those accomplishments look like, why you weren't able to maybe reach those, or why you were able to reach those in the end. Reasonable goals. So what I thought on this was it allows the company to focus on important um, attributes for obtainable behavior. This helps also in creating specific data points that a company can use to check their positioning and their performance. It helps them to understand where you are right now and how it's going to be more realistic to get to where you want to get to, like as opposed to actions. Um, and a lot of the times, like realistically, you have to like really be realistic. Some people might say, oh, we want to do this at the end of this year. Okay, that's not realistic. Like a lot of times it's going to be 2 to 5 years out, but it's being able to say, okay, I can realistically look at that and say, this is how we're going to get there.
Right. So like like short term, there needs to be some like short terms within, you have a long term big goal, but it's
Right.
like those steps to get there. Yeah.
Right. Right. So like, for example, if my job performance is inadequate, the employees might not have like received appropriate training. So like my possible solution for that is, okay, what are the critical needs that are then identified and documented? Like what are the organizational restructuring that might be addressed? What are the costs that might be implemented for the purpose of the solution? Like how can I compare the cost of like one solution to another? And how are we going to maintain that over a period of time? How long is it going to take us to train them? Do we have to bring them all at one time? What happens when we hire new people? What is that going to look like? So we end up not having the same issue. It's just making sure that you have reasonable goals within that. All right. And my next slide. All right. So what are the importance of the four principles? So when we're thinking about results, I think that I kind of went and looked at the ISBE's website when I was looking at this.
Right.
So they really talked about how it applies the knowledge of what is required for the performance at all levels, really helping the client and the stakeholders to define what it is they want to accomplish, how to guide them guide them in how you're going to convert those results to be measurable. Because a lot of times, like even when I'm dealing with stakeholders, they will have things in their grant and I'm like, that's not measurable. You like a lot of times I'm like, you can't measure that in a classroom. Like this is a museum. It's going to be hard to measure that. So we need to find a way to create something that we can actually measure with kids that's going to be reasonable for them. And it really helping them to like examine the motives behind their request. Like, why do they need to know that? For example, they were asking us, how many Black kids, how many Hispanic kids, how many Indian kids were in the group. And I was like, well, these are also still people. So in a reasonable matter, I'm not going to go to every single child and say, hey, do you know what you're mixed with? The more, reasonable request would be, what is the percentage that school holds and how many kids are you getting? You're not going to get those exact measures. Like that's being too impersonal. And then you have, there's so many other forms you have to fill out, but that's like one example of me having to deal with that. That was like, no.
Yeah.
For systems, so being able to like identify the subsystems within the systems that create the total organization as a whole. Mm-hmm. So how can certain things be interdependent, but then also how are some things dependent on each other? So if I move this ladle a little bit here, what else is going to fall back in response to that? But if I have success here, what's also going to be successful? So like being able to recognize those things within that system. When thinking about value, so how are your results helping to be more effective and efficient? So how are you going to have higher quality out of it? How are you making sure that, they are staying like, how are you making sure that like your design and your development of whatever it is you're doing is actually making a difference? What are the risks and the cost behind that? And basically like, how are you going to like adopt new behaviors to reach those desired goals? So like making sure that they are saying that they are understanding that you're able to help them, and that, well, also that their voice is valued within the process as well. And making sure that they feel represented throughout the whole process. Cause I know that helps a lot. I know in a meeting once, we were dealing with Jacobs and they were having an issue with not feeling like they were being heard. And they were not shy about saying that to my bosses. And I was just sitting there like, they're the ones with the money, right? Like, okay, great. So like, making sure that they feel like, hey, we're the ones here fitting the bill, like, so it's like our job to make sure they feel valued, and that we're using their money responsibly, right? And that we're not wasting their time in the process.
Right.
Yeah. And then the last one is partnership. So I guess that one kind of aligns with partnership as well. It's just making sure you're collaborating all the way through, making sure that they feel like their decisions are a part of it, gaining their trust and their respect, because that's how you continue to get money. Wonderful, right? And building partnerships along the way. Networking is like the biggest thing, especially in my line of work, because you never know what other partnerships or what other companies are going to like be like, oh, hey, we've got $5,000 that we want to give you guys to help some kids. And we say, okay, cool. And we get a chance to like really do some amazing work, but none of that can be done if we don't make sure that we're creating those partnerships, and making sure that they can trust us that we're using their stuff responsibly.
Yeah.
So that's all I got.
While we're switching over, will you remind me of where is it that you work?
I work at Space Center Houston.
Oh, okay, very cool.
Yeah, but I actually just quit recently, which is fun. Yeah. So I'll be starting working at JSC in a couple of weeks. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. so I'll be taking, you can see mine.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I'm in an 8th grade classroom right now, so mine will be more geared to like
Classroom.
yeah, and so like trying to making that connections, like how this relates to like where I'm working, I think will help me out in the, like in the job world too, whenever if I'm transitioning to corporate, like, okay, well, how did I use that before at my previous position? So, but I do like hearing the multiple like perspectives of where people work and how they use this.
Yeah, that's always been really nice in the program, especially working with the different partners and saying, okay, or it's like, oh, you use that completely different than how I use it, but I could see how I also could use that. So that's great.
Yeah. It is so nice. It is because we're all very different, a lot of us, and it's really nice because you have a lot of higher education, corporate, K through 12. So it's really nice. Nonprofit.
Yeah.
Okay. I go through mine. So if I'll probably repeat a lot of what you said. You had some great visuals too. But just stop me at any time if you want to chat about it. But so what is HPT? It's human performance technology. It focuses on maximizing the valued achievements of people within a work setting. So I think of it as kind of like a toolbox that holds the tools that we need to address the organizational performance problems. So the criteria, is it focused on valuable measured results? Does it consider the larger systems in context of people's performance? And does it provide valid and reliable measures of the effectiveness of those applications?
I like that. I like that it's a box of tools that are
yeah.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, it was a good analogy that I read up. I didn't come up with them, of course. So what's the difference between HPI versus HPT? I read a lot where it's like, okay, many things are different, and then yet it's also synonymous. So I think it can be terminology that can be interchangeable, or that it is interchangeable a lot. Performance improvement, it's what we wish to achieve, while HPT is the means we wish to achieve it. Mm-hmm. I read in our textbook that HPI was a more relatively new term, and it was kind of developed in the 90s, while HPT, it took form in the 70s and it was officially recognized in the 80s, but they can be used synonymously, defined and achieved in much the same way.
It's kind of interesting that like the means in which we achieve was accomplished or was recognized before what we mean to achieve. Because when you're looking at like those ID models and they say, don't try to find, a lot of them are like, don't find your materials until you understand why you need your materials.
Right.
It's just interesting that this is the way that they were recognized was a little bit backwards.
And
I wonder if that had a lot to do with why now we're saying, don't go looking for technological ways to present your instruction until you know why you're actually using
exactly. Yeah. And then it was saying too that performance improvement, like it can sound a little more harsh too. Like, well, I guess if you hear that from HR or something, you're like, like I'm on an improvement plan, or something's going down, like what, this doesn't sound right. But if you're like, oh, this is our human performance technology system, and it just has a little bit better, like, oh, okay, this is like how we can, like better all of us or something. It doesn't sound so personal.
Yeah, I agree.
So why is it systematic? And again, I was going back and forth, like, oh, it's both systematic and systemic. So that's why I asked you before we started, just to make sure that I didn't say the wrong one. So it takes into account essential variables for learning. It's done methodically according to a fixed plan or system, and it views performance outcomes as the end result of a number of interacting elements. So that's all the different things that work together, and looking at it kind of as a whole unit in steps versus like specific parts, I guess. Okay, what is the performance gap? It's the space that represents the difference in where a learner is currently performing. So that's your actuals, and then where they need to be performing the optimals. So it also identifies the areas of need and a growth opportunity as well. So it doesn't have to just be like shortcomings as much as like, hey, there's places here where we can become more efficient, or we can know more about. a reasonable goal, make sure that it feels possible and in control of the individuals asked to close the gap.
Mhm.
So as long as they kind of have a say in it as well, and they feel like, okay, I can do this. Like, it's not just someone sitting in corporate making these like crazy, insane goals that, you'll never reach. And kind of how we talked about it, it's more of like your milestones.
Right.
Let's have milestones versus like, the big ultimate goal, and
Right.
giving them these kind of gives us something to measure as well, so that we know, okay, if we haven't met that goal, where do we need to go back and reteach? Because you have to make those goals before you can make something big.
Right. Right. And I mean, I'm sure that helps the kid too.
Oh,
Instead
yeah.
of being like, this is where we want you to be, and give them little things that they can feel accomplished with and have kind of like confidence in before
Right.
they reach that knowledgeable goal of what you want them to retain. So
Right. And especially because I work with SPED. And so it's like, okay, well, where can we back this up? What's our need to know first in order to have, the 8th grade standard? What's our need to know before we can meet that? So I make that their goal. Like, so that first they need to show, progress and mastery of that basic part of it.
right.
And then we can move on and add parts to it. So the importance of the 4 principles: to focus on their results. It's important to remain impartial and focus on actual data and look for the bottom line results. Take a systemic view. Human performance gaps are looked at as elements of systems, which in turn work with other systems.
Mhm.
Add value. Use performance system and analysis either to design innovative applications that provide new and better ways to achieve results, or to troubleshoot the organization and better align it for success. So using kind of what you've learned to add value, to make it, to either improve or make it better.
Like build upon it once you have that foundational support.
Right. And then establish partnerships. No one person can be an expert in all aspects of a system.
Mhm.
So getting an input from a variety of experts. So like for me in teaching, it would be, like, is there a student that, may struggle, they may have like dyslexia. So for me to just say, okay, I know how they can reach their goal. With dyslexia, it's good for me to go out and like find an expert, like how can I best support them in this goal? And, bringing in LSSPs, the school psychologists, the diagnosticians. So just knowing that me alone probably can't answer all parts, or, when a student comes in with like, dynamic needs, it's good to ask for help and get a second opinion as well, like an outside. So.
Yeah, especially because you never know. There's always something extra that you may not have thought of or taken into consideration.
Yeah. With that, I was thinking too of like, and like I was watching recently a documentary of somebody doing like a mural and like painting a mural, and like how they look at it from like this close and have to every once in a while like step back, or like have somebody behind them say, hey, this isn't going to line up, or just being able to have someone, an extra pair of eyes behind you to say, here's where you need to go, or here's where it's looking kind of wonky.
That's a great representation. I like that a lot. That's good.
But this one, I don't know, this usually on these presentations, we've kind of done like pick your favorite, or so they've been different. This one was kind of, I guess, harder because we knew we were going to have kind of the same. So how do you go, how do you bring something new to it?
Right.
But
I think we did it.
Yeah. Good job.
Yeah. Okay, well, that is the end of our review of human performance technology / improvements.
Yes.
Guys,
thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, night, weekend.